In the book The Art of Character, author David Corbett states that every story worth telling in some way mirrors our lives, and to that extent explores four key questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? And what does it mean? He continues later, saying, "We see in our characters reflections of ourselves, which is why we detect in their stories, no matter how fanciful or dark or grand, an attempt to better understand our lives. And what else is there to discuss, really, than our lives?" Now, if you don't know, we're Scribble, a writing tool that helps writers create more compelling stories, and we're a bit obsessed with character development. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to walk you through a 15-point character profile template designed to help you create deeper and more engaging characters. Now, in future videos, I'll cover each of these 15 points in much more detail, but the purpose of this video tutorial right now is to just give you a top-level overview of how to put a character profile template like this together. Now, of course, you can map out your character profile using a pencil and paper, but I'm going to do this all over in Scribble. Now, if you want to follow along digitally, just log in and then create a new project, or click on an existing one and then click over on People and Places. You'll be asked to create a new character. You can do that, and then after your character is created, you can simply click on this little edit icon down here. Now, from here, you're going to see your character profile template. So let's start going through each of these items in more detail. Now, under the character name, you'll see the main character profile template section here. You can hover over each icon to see what each icon represents. Now, I'm going to begin by clicking on this first icon, which is the character's external want. Now, the character want is the thing that your character will quest towards in your story. Establishing this want is important because it's what will propel your character through your various plot points. If I jump over to plot visualization here, you'll see that my acts are broken up into a series of chapters. Now remember, we need a reason to move our character between these acts and between these different chapters. Your main character can't just wander around aimlessly. They need to have some objective, some goal, some final destination. Back over in our People and Places page, this want section is where we place that external desire. Next, we have the character's internal need. Now, need is different than want, and there is quite often a bit of friction between want and need. We have an entire tutorial dedicated to this topic with examples over on our blog, which I'll link to below, but let me just give you a quick example so you get the gist of it. Now, in the book, The Lost City of Z, the protagonist, Percy Fawcett, wants to go on an expedition to find a lost world in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. Again, this external want is what propels the action of the book forward. However, there is something subtler below the surface that makes the story more interesting. Remember, your external want moves the character from point A to point B, but the underlying internal need, which is often not explicitly stated, especially not early on, is what the character is really striving towards their want for. It's the why behind the want, and it often exists at a subconscious or barely conscious level. So in The Lost City of Z, the protagonist was questing towards his want, the discovering of a lost world, because he had an unmet need for recognition and respect. He believes that finding his want will satisfy his need. However, in this story, the character never makes it out of the jungle alive. Essentially, his want stopped him from achieving his need. And this is what I meant when I said that there's often a lot of friction between these two character elements. Next, we have obstacles. Now, obstacles are the things that get in your protagonist's way during their quest towards their want. Without a want, it's kind of hard to put things in their way. That's why you generally establish your want and your need first. After that, you can think creatively about how you can place your character's want just outside of their reach, which means they'll need to really work for it in order to get it. For example, in The Lost City of Z, the protagonist finds himself fighting off starvation in the middle of the jungle. He finds himself under attack by local tribes. He finds himself negotiating and failing at getting the funding necessary for his expeditions. And the list goes on. These obstacles are designed specifically to impede your protagonist's progress towards their final goal. Next, we have lie, which is essentially a misbelief your character tells themselves about how the world works. Sometimes this stops them from being able to see their true internal needs, and it often propels them in a kind of misguided way towards their external want. A good character lie is often constructed as a subtle and elusive antagonistic force that lies just below the surface of your story. Next, we have contradictions. To flesh out your characters, it's important to understand how they behave under different circumstances, physically, emotionally, and morally. How is your character different at church compared to how they behave amongst friends or at a rock concert? How do your characters navigate the seemingly incompatible parts of their personality? Contradiction is everywhere. It's within all of us, so find it within your characters. Next, we have the ghost or the wound. This is the thing that makes your protagonist vulnerable. This wound is often established long before your story actually begins, but it's the thing that holds the character back and follows them around like a shadow or ghost. Think of past traumas which haunt your protagonist but contribute a lot to their personality. Now, these ghosts are also often the source of the character's misbelief or lie. Those misbeliefs just don't get formed out of nothing. They often have their source as this ghost or this wound. So ask yourself, what wounds are your characters carrying around with them? Next, we have backstory. Our backstory allows us to explore who our characters were in the past. Backstory can help readers emotionally invest in, as well as emotionally connect to, your characters, even if your characters leave a lot to be desired. Because this way we can see where the characters are coming from, and it helps us understand why they behave the way that they do. The mask is the character's ego. The mask is the identity the character wants to project out into the world. It's a way for the character to control how they are perceived by others. How they dress and behave in different settings allows them to show off their mask. Through the mask, they try to tell the world something about themselves. But why does your character want to express this mask to the world? We need to ask not only what the mask conceals about our character's weaknesses and hides about their secret self, but also what type of rejection the mask protects the character against. Next, we have the inner core, or the philosophical makeup of the character. This is essentially your character's inner life, their emotions, feelings, passions, fears, hates, and hopes. Next, we have sociology. This is similar to psychology, but instead of an exploration of the character's inner world, we look at how the character thinks and behaves socially. How does your character interact in the real world, and specifically with other people? How do they deal with things like guilt, shame, and failure in the public realm? And then lastly here we have quirks. These are the little tics that make your character unique. They could be things like mannerisms or unique catchphrases, bad habits, and so on. Next, up here, we have our character chart. Now, this is a really helpful tool to make sure that you're not designing two-dimensional characters or two-dimensional groups of characters. Now, some of the best stories in the world are created when you put together seemingly incompatible people and you put them in the same room together to watch what happens. Also, at an individual level, we need to make sure we're not designing flat or perfect characters. You don't want to have perfectly likable characters who are always active and very brave in the pursuit of their goal. This chart allows you to visualize the well-roundedness of your character. For example, in the hit series Billions, Axe is an investment fund founder, but he isn't the most likable character. He backstabs people, he's an opportunist to the most extreme levels, he's fueled by hatred and revenge, and he makes many questionable ethical decisions. So under likability, he wouldn't score very high. But as an audience, we're attracted to him not because he's a nice guy with this acceptable moral compass, but because he's overcome enormous odds. He's wildly competent in his field of work, and he redefines what it means to be ambitious. And as an audience, we connect with him for these other characteristic traits. So you don't want to see perfect scores across the board here. You want to see real characters with real flaws. So ask yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Is my character active or passive in the pursuit of their goal? Is my character different than the other characters in the cast of my story? Will my readers be empathetic with the plight of this character even if my character isn't likable? Is this character intriguing and interesting? Is this character likable? Again, you don't want to have a character chart with perfect 5-star rating across the board here. A character that looks like this will be much less interesting than a flawed character that looks a bit more like this. Next, we have to determine character arc. Now, I tend to find knowing this early on helpful when writing. So are you working with a character with a positive change arc, a negative change arc, or a flat character arc? Now, in the future, we'll publish a tutorial dedicated to this topic exclusively, but when you're using a character profile template like this to create a character, it's often helpful to know the character's arc beforehand, so you can set this up here. Now, as we scroll down here, we can just place one-liners for wants, needs, lies, and ghosts, which helps us see these things at a glance. And then next, we have stakes. Now, stakes are simply what your character stands to lose if they don't accomplish their goal. Your character has to gamble something. If they fail, they can't just end back up where they were. They have to end up in a worse situation. And we need to consider 2 levels of stakes here. because we have the stakes associated with our character's external goal, but we also have the stakes associated with our character's internal need. What will be the consequences of not satisfying the character want? What will be the consequences of not satisfying the character's need? And there will often be times, both internally and externally, where the character will need to navigate moral no-win situations, where essentially they have to engage in some kind of trade-off between the lesser of two evils. We can learn a lot about our characters when they are confronted with complex stakes like this. Lastly, on our character profile template here, we can pre-plan our ending. Now this quadrant ties a lot of what we've talked about so far together. Essentially, we have 4 possible endings. Will the character achieve their external want and internal need, resulting in a happy ending? Will the character achieve their need but not their want, or vice versa, resulting in an unresolved semi-happy ending? Or will the character have unmet wants and needs by the end of the story, resulting in a tragic ending? Again, knowing this before you start writing can really help with plotting your story, especially early on. So that's a character profile template in a nutshell. And remember, if you want to use this character profile template or any of our other character development tools that you saw featured in this video, simply head over to Scribble, which I've linked to below, sign up and then log in. Once you're logged in, you simply need to add a new project and then click over on People and Places in the sidebar and then start adding characters. Also, remember to subscribe to our channel as we have a lot of other great content that explores character development in much more detail. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for stopping by.